another episode of the Heartland Author Podcast. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For today's episode, I had the honor to interview Jimi Fritz. Jimi, who is from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, is the author of the books Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer and Rave Culture. This interview is primarily about Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer. Due to an audio echoing issue that occurred during the actual recording of the interview, the portions where I am speaking during the interview have been re-recorded. I'm here with Jimi Fritz, who is the author of Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer. Jimi, welcome to the Heartland Author Podcast.
Hi, how you doing? Well, greetings from Vancouver, BC.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners, and I understand that you're from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada.
Well, I'm from England originally, and then I moved to Canada about 30 years ago. And I live in BC. And I'm a writer and a filmmaker and a musician. I have a website at jimifritz.ca that's got lots of music videos and I've got screenplays and books and movies and 5 albums. So I'm a pretty creative guy and I like to keep myself amused.
Now, without spoiling too much of Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer, what is that book about?
Well, it's about my experiences. I've done a lot of traveling. I was on the road for many, many, many years and went to a lot of different countries and had lots of adventures. So it's basically, I call it a psychedelic travelogue and memoir. So it's about my travels geographically and also my travels with psychedelic drugs. So I've been doing psychedelics for 50 years and had nothing but, good results. And so I wanted to, provide a kind of a realistic look at a life on psychedelics. So it's a 50-year journey geographically and psychologically through the world and through the mind.
Now, what types of psychedelic drugs have you used, and were you on psychedelic drugs while you were writing your book?
No. No, I don't think you could write very well on acid. But, it does stimulate the imagination and inspiration, and so it does fuel my writing. I mean, I think psychedelics change the way your brain works. So you do have a different perspective, a different way of looking at things, and that certainly comes through when you do create or when you do make music. But no, I can't do any of those things when I'm high. But it informs everything I do when I'm straight.
Now, do you support legalization of psychedelic drugs for medical, recreational, or both medical and recreational use in any jurisdiction where psychedelic drugs are currently illegal?
Yes, I do. I think it's a human rights issue or a civil rights issue. I think if you have, your consciousness, the contents of your consciousness, the contents of your brain, your body, what you put into your body, is yours to do with as you please as an autonomous human being, even if that makes making a mistake. I mean, there's lots of people out there that are eating themselves to death, right? They're eating junk food every day and drinking great, gallons of pop every day, and they're virtually killing themselves, but we don't legislate against that. So psychedelics cause a lot less harm than that. And I think ultimately for me it's like we should have the rights as an autonomous human beings to put in our body or influence our mind any way we see fit, as long as it doesn't infringe upon anybody else's freedoms or anybody else, as long as you're not bothering anybody else. It should have nothing to do with the state at all. Like much the same way as sexuality. I mean, people have a lot of weird ways they go about sex. But the government doesn't feel that it has the right to legislate what goes on in someone's bedroom. I don't think they have the right to legislate what goes on inside your brain.
And I'm also a person who believes that people shouldn't have the freedom to harm others, but whatever they do that doesn't harm anyone else is not something I get offended or bothered by.
Exactly. I mean, if it doesn't affect you, then why would you be bothered? It's like things like gay marriage. Why are you bothered that two people of the same sex want to get married? You don't have to do it. You don't have to go to the wedding. It doesn't affect you in any way whatsoever. So why would you want to control what somebody else is doing? Because and when it's what they want to be doing.
Is your book Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer self-published or traditionally published?
It's self-published. I did get some offers for traditional publishing. I just finished a new book. My new novel is called The End of Everything. And I'm shopping that around to some publishers, but I'm also thinking maybe I won't go that route because there's so many hoops to jump through. They want to design your book. They want to design your copy, on your cover. They want to design your cover. They've got something to say about how it's written. They want to edit it. They ask an awful lot for very little. And at the end of the day, I'm not sure that they really have the ability to sell any more books than you do on the internet yourself. I think the traditional model of publishing is kind of outdated, and I think it's going to fade away. It's probably going to break up. I mean, there's only 4 publishers in the world now, and it's it's a real monopoly. And I'm just not sure that they deliver on what they promise. They want everything their way, and the writer is just secondary to all that. And at the end of the day, to get a publisher in the first place, you need an agent. So to get an agent, that's hard enough. But once you've got an agent who's now going to take 15%, then they shop you to a publisher, and then you get the publisher. Now the publisher's going to want a 40%. And then they're going to sell it through venues that want a cut of that, and returns, and blah, blah, blah. You end up with a couple of bucks per book. You've got to sell an awful lot of books to make a living. So I'm kind of disillusioned with the regular publishing route. So I don't know. I've shopped it around. I have had some interest, so we'll see what they come up with. And I may publish my new book traditionally. I may not. I'm not sure. Anyway, Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer is published through Ingram Spark, which is an online publishing forum. You just upload your books there. They post it to all the Amazons. They post it to Google Books and Apple Books and Goodreads and blah blah. It's all over. It's everywhere. So anybody types in your name or the name of the book, they find it, and it's available. And you get most of the money. So, that seems like a better way to go to me. So I've been doing that, and you can do your own, advertising campaigns through Fiverr or ReadZ. There's a bunch of sites that just do book promotions. So there are other ways of going, and so that's what I did with Confessions. I've made back my $4,500 publishing fees so far, and I'm into the profits. So, it's not doing too badly, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, one word I've used to describe the traditional publishing industry is stodgy.
Yeah. I think if you've got a commercial book, if you have a real, hot genre fiction, or if you're Michael Pollan and you have really hot non-fiction books, I think that's probably the way to go, because you get the widest distribution. It's going to sell anyway. But for books like I'm writing for a niche market. My new book is kind of a Kafkaesque, Dostoevsky, it's about a guy sitting at a typewriter plotting his own suicide. And it's not the kind of thing that somebody's going to pick up in an airport library, an airport bookstore. So I don't know whether the traditional route is really the place for this book. So some books are more suited for that market than others. My books are kind of fringe books. They're not Dan Brown or Michael Crichton.
Okay, now you've mentioned a book that you are currently looking to publish. Could you tell us a little bit about that without spoiling too much of it?
Well, that's The End of Everything. That's the one I just described, actually. It's a guy sitting at a typewriter in a mental asylum plotting his own suicide. And he's ranting about the world and everything that's wrong with it and why it's a good idea to commit suicide. It's hilarious. It's a comedy. I think it's funny. It cracks me up anyway. But Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer, which is available at fine bookstores everywhere and online everywhere, is a romp, a romp through the world and adventures in psychedelic drug use. And I did another book, actually. Previous to that, I published a book called Rave Culture, an Insider's Overview. And that's also available everywhere on the net. And it's about the rave culture and a global overview of the rave phenomenon.
In addition to your work writing Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer and Rave Culture, you are a musician. Now, what genres of music do you perform?
I do basically ballads, folk ballads and jazz ballads. And so, again, it's not that commercial. It's not something you're going to hear on the radio. I write lyrics that mean something, that are about something. I have 5 albums you can download at. You have a couple of other albums. You have an album of Bob Dylan songs and an album of jazz standards, and then there's 2 albums of original songs, and then a bunch of electronic remixes of my songs, and they are all available on jimifritz.ca.
Now, you have also written 2 feature-length screenplays, is that correct?
Yes.
What are the screenplays you've written, and what are some differences between how you approach writing a screenplay as opposed to writing a book?
Well, they're completely different genre. There's a vast difference. In a novel, you can do internal dialogue. You can describe things endlessly. You can in a screenplay, you're just dealing with what you can see. So you're just describing what you can see on the screen. If you can't see it, it's not happening. So you can't have 5 pages of a character thinking about something. Like my new book, Confession, at the end of everything, the guy's just sitting at a typewriter and thinking. Well, that doesn't make for a very interesting movie. Just see a guy typing on a machine. You can do voiceover for some degree, but not to that degree. So yeah, it's very different genre. In a screenplay, you're describing what you can see, and in a book, you're describing what you can think.
Jimmy, you are a wonderful guest for this podcast, and I thank you for appearing on the Heartland Author Podcast.
Okay, well, thanks for having me.
It is always wonderful to interview an interesting person like Jimmy. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding you all to write your imagination. Bye for now. You can learn more about me and my book writing projects at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/authoraac. You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook at AuthorAAC and on Instagram at AACScribe. Copyright 2023, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.